Meat wise.
Oh shit, I forgot.
Yeah.
Meat what?
Waz.
Wazza. Wazzer.
Oh, Waz. I think you said Waz.
Big Waz Rooney.
Or Waz, like Waz Parent.
De Blasio.
Oh, yeah.
Wazza. It was like I was saying on the Discord, I don't remember people who are named Gary. I just know people who are named Gaz.
I wonder when that nickname convention really took off. It's funny that it doesn't exist at all in the U.S.
Well, isn't it that it's like a phonetic version of when, like, for a person named Gary, it's when you're calling them Gares. Like, where in American English you would be pronouncing the R, but it's like Gaz or Gaz if you're saying short diminutive for Gary.
Maybe.
I feel like there are a lot of
But then, like, Wayne being Waz, that's just like the formula.
Well, but that's after Gascoigne. That's like an homage to Gascoigne, though. Like borrowing that. It's not based on. I don't think anybody named Wayne besides Rooney gets called Waz.
There's also Jez, though, which is
Jers, like Jeremy.
Jers. Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
I think that I'm pretty sure that's what
Oh,
it
that
is.
makes sense. Now that I say it,
I
out
haven't
loud to
officially
myself.
looked that up, but I've just always assumed that that's what it is.
Jezza. Oh, okay. I see how that comes about.
Baz, Bears.
But Gascoigne is one of the more head-on ones, but
Right. Is Gascoigne like a French name? Or is that just...
I assume it's like a Norman name.
Yeah.
Like, I assume Lampard and Gerrard are.
Got all the way up to Newcastle.
Yeah. Well, it's weird too because like in the Northeast and like Durham and stuff, they have a lot of those towns that are called like Chester Le Street and like Pool Le Road or like shit like that.
Huh.
That have weird little like lays and days in them.
I wonder... That's weird, because I feel like there's also still old, like, remnants of Viking names and stuff up there, but maybe it was...
I think Middlesbrough has... All of the towns around Middlesbrough are Viking names.
It'd be fun if there was like a village who randomly just kept.
Ormsby? Yeah, that sounds pretty...
Yeah.
Normanby?
Like a Hammerson type of
Hitchinthorpe?
naming convention. That'd be fun.
Yeah.
A Johnson.
Yeah, maybe it's
Right.
something where also then the Normans came in, they felt the need to settle new towns or rename things all. The names in Ireland are a fucking mess.
I guess that there's some tie-in too with like surname differences between like the North and South. Like I'm just remembering that Penfish post. That was like people in Southern England are called like Jacob Rees-Mogg, while people in North England are called like Ian Brother Steak, like and shit like that.
Right,
Ian Milkwater, like
Right. Alright, well, I think it's episode 220, right? Yeah, I just checked a second ago. Episode 220, A View from 202.
It's like an anagram episode.
220?
Yeah.
Of 202?
Yeah.
Is that... Not quite... Oh, anagram, not... I was thinking of palindrome, and I was taking a real long second to think about that.
It's only 3 letters.
Not a pal. No, I was like wondering if you're combining 220
okay.
and 202, and I was like, I'm 90% sure that's not a palindrome, but let me check. But in either case, it's number 220 of 202 after another pretty big loss.
Just a little. Nah, it was just a little Tuesday night.
Yeah,
Just a boring little midweek game.
Exhilarating shootout game. What if we build it that way? Oh, we lose a heartbreaker.
A thrilling fight to the end.
Yeah. With the last
On
minute.
a narrow offside call.
Yeah, really. Yeah. Just at the death. So close. Sam's not here this week, so it's
He gave up.
yeah. He's not leaving the storage container until who knows when. It's Brit, Cork, and Peaches then, and we're recording 2 days before DC on the weekend. So between Colorado loss and the DC game this weekend, and on the very end of the transfer window, right? That's today. That's right now that it's ended. Is that right?
Right now, Thursday evening. Whenever this gets out, you'll know what all the presents under the tree are. But
Be sure to make an addendum here if something happens before midnight.
Yeah, exactly.
Does it end at midnight?
Isn't that usually the case?
I thought so, but then this year the baseball deadline ended at 6 p.m. So
I was just going to say,
there's a chance.
I'll be on my phone like Jeff Passan through the episode.
You'll be hounding people outside.
Oh my god, a cork bomb.
Cork pop. Thank you.
Cork pop, right? Yeah, Jesus, sorry. I was gonna say if this starts to take, like, we can't ironically start doing this because I'll never be able to live with myself.
I've already had the EDSS conglomerate green lights and budget on the marketing front to get some catchphrases for you when
Buy
you can
some
confirm
tweets,
some transfers.
That's
Juice it a little bit.
Any help, man?
We actually looked into buying the intellectual property of Here We Go from Fabrizio Romano, but turns out anybody can just say it.
Nice.
Here we go.
So
that wasn't that you couldn't.
You could just say it if you wanted to.
I'm putting the finishing touches on my cameo at this point.
Ooh, nice.
So that ought to have some good material soon.
You know, I wonder if you sign up for Cameo. Well, maybe they vet you. I don't know. But if you could just sign up for Cameo as like a random person, like if just like playing the numbers, if there's just one really confused or random weird person who's like, yeah, I'll spend $5 to get this.
to have some guy in Dallas just say some shit.
I guess that's kind of, you can do that on Fiverr. I guess that was the.
But like, I feel like there are people who are just like, oh yeah, get a furry to say your birth. Like, what are the validation requirements for something like that?
I don't know.
You don't have to be that.
Or but if you write your bio in like the right way with like the boilerplate sort of like PR, but kind of hyping yourself kind of way, I could see somebody being like, oh yeah, this is like Ben Cork. Like, he's gonna tell my grandson happy birthday. Like,
I have breaking news.
My grandson loves soccer. He loves journalism. Soccer journalist Ben Cork in my budget range to give him a fair birthday message.
I'm getting word through the Austrian press that it is Caleb's birthday.
Multiple sources can confirm
I got
that you are engaged.
Not once, but multiple time legend of the month in the New York Red Bulls discussion group to wish you a happy birthday. Not that you achieved that feat. I don't mean to steal valor.
I'm not there yet.
No, but please do not claim false valor.
Speaking of that, how was television? I guess it's not the silver screen. How was the
boob tube?
Yeah, it was the boob tube. Your appearance on MSG on Tuesday.
It was fun. It was interesting. Thanks to the whole MSG crew. Michelle was great, made it real easy, and all I had to do was just kind of sit there and look sweaty. Like,
I was gonna say, okay, you don't have to say it because you're contractually obligated not to talk trash on MSG because you're now obviously a paid shill.
But
I will say on Cork's behalf, the television did make him look a lot grimier and worse than he is in person.
I didn't even really think he looked that sweaty. I mean, your shirt didn't look sweaty,
which I feel like is
the most important part.
You're just ruining the perspective, I'm reshifting kind of the expectations. Yeah, like here for on Cork's behalf, saying that he looked worse on television than he looks in person because he's a good-looking man and he is a very well-spoken person as well. And you saw that on television, but it's even more apparent in person.
In real life, he's actually 9 feet tall and has no hair on his body whatsoever, and
sit on rocks in the Yavapai County desert.
He painstakingly glues that mustache on before every episode.
That's
actually.
right.
It's not even like makeup glue. It's just Elmer's glue, which explains the sweaty look. But what? So I confess my ESPN Plus doesn't kick in until like first minute of the game. So what'd you talk about? Like, what were the questions?
It was just kind of obviously it was before everything that unfolded in the Colorado game. It was in the pregame of the Colorado game, but we just kind of went over, a lot of the kind of summer narratives, so to speak, just sort of how the team had gone through the Open Cup and what that meant that the team was no longer in the Open Cup, and just what the team has to do to get into kind of Champions League spots and just sort of get themselves reorganized ahead of the last couple months of the season. And then, of course, the game against Colorado happened, and there was a little bit more color drawn in on the whole season. But
You're ignoring the best part, which is he also did a tier list of all the podcast hosts by attractiveness with
by attractiveness. Yeah.
Unfortunately, Brit, you only made C tier, but that's pretty good. You know?
That's pretty good. I assume the top 3 tiers were BMS. So, the different forms.
B, M, and S. Yeah, exactly.
S tier, obviously, is the B.
from number 1, Ben Mindstan. Number 2, Tyler Adams Stan.
Oh, yeah. No, we don't want to say too much beyond that. We don't want to say reveal the 4 names of God.
Our benefactor.
Sorry for beating the mic twice in a row there. But yeah, this game against Colorado started out well, but really fell apart again in the second half. This is, I think, the most intense of the recent collapses in the last 3 or 4 weeks. 3 weeks, I guess, right? This time, I guess, was obscured a little bit on the final score by the fact that we clawed 1 or 2 goals back. But we go up big against Colorado, 2-0, then give up a cheap goal on a sort of not well thought out pass by Cornell, but then a turnover by CCJ that gets Colorado back to 2-1, but then we strike back really quickly to make it 3-1, almost even have a player sent off. Even when Lalas Abubakar was not sent off, though, I think that a lot of people were probably sitting there thinking maybe that's not the worst thing in the world, because Abubakar was having a terrible game, had basically gifted us 2 goals alone by that point, and was coughing the ball up all over the pitch.
I had joked at the time that Colorado should have taken a strategic red card there, honestly.
And also, just the way we play, I mean, it's a little bit of a microcosm of what happens on our record away versus home, but it's also that we struggle a little bit against teams with 10 men that are not taking chances, that are just kind of closing up shop for the rest of the night, which, all the more speaking to what you're saying.
So I feel like struggle is an understatement for, obviously what happens in the rest of this game, but go on.
But against the 10 men in the abstract,
Yeah.
And then, so we're sitting there 3-1, and then and at that point in the match, it looks like, we're really running roughshod over them. Yeah, they got 1 back quickly, but it was really just based off of a unforced error on our part, the Red Bulls' part, and we were really having our way. But lo and behold, Keegan Rosenberry scores a couple minutes later on a deflection, but that
Luquinhas goal.
That same part of the pitch that we've been talking about, that same part of the pitch off a second ball.
Yeah.
And then go into the half 3-2, and in the second half, lose control of the game, end up getting to 5 goals. Once one of them is actually called off by VAR due to a screening call, but then Colorado promptly comes back and scores a 5th one anyway. We scrap back a late penalty, but really there's just a stretch of this game where our defense has completely lost its shape, its mentality, its will to defend, its will to live even, maybe. Sorry, this pop filter is like falling all over the place. What happened? What's the problem here, huh?
I don't know. It's kind of funny because I feel like after we had scored the second goal, I wasn't all that excited or like confident in the rest of the game going well. And, unfortunately, I think I was my biases were confirmed by the end of that game.
That is unfortunate.
When it was 2-0?
When it was 2-0, yeah. I didn't get out of my seat for any of our goals because I never at any point did I really think, this is going to end out great for us, which, maybe reminiscent of, dare I say, like times where we were back when we were.
You can just say it now. You can just say this.
No, I know, but like back during the zone. But it's like, I don't know. I was just like,
I was going to say, even, I mean, I'm not the first person to make this observation in the last week, but kind of like even more recent. Mind you, it was the injury crisis last summer, but that summer where we dropped a few different results from winning positions, where there's games this team plays where they go up early, they go up by a couple goals in the first half, and then they just close it out. But then there's other games where, the structure is completely lost, and the team ends up just letting other teams back into the game.
Yeah, and like also the trend of the second half, and kind of like me not having faith that our subs that are coming in are necessarily productive players are going to continue.
I don't think the issue is that the players are not good enough.
Well, I don't think that's the issue either. But like the players that are productive enough and have been contributing are being yanked off too. So that's. I
don't even know if that's the dichotomy as much as just with these game situations that are created by these changes and the timing of them and the extent of them. Is whether players are being put in positions to succeed, even if they're not being productive, which I think has been kind of a theme of the season, even before this collapse in the last couple of weeks. It's hard. It speaks to what I think has been maybe the most interesting point that's been made by us geniuses this season. What Brit said about accountability and how when players are constantly changing positions, systems or formations are changing week to week and half to half, and even in a lot of cases where players aren't even getting 50-55 minutes to show what they can do on either side of a half, how can you even criticize a guy who is supposedly I'm talking about not us. I'm talking about in the locker room. How can you even get on a guy for supposedly falling short in a game when nobody really knows what their bar to meet is week to week, or whether it's a new bar every single week? I just thought that was such a kind of point that's been so cogent throughout this season, that how can you even hold each other accountable when nobody really knows what the expectations are week to week.
And then add a little dollop on top of the manager progressively shifting more and more towards saying, like, you guys need to figure this out. When he's talking to the press, when he's talking to the public, saying like, like my young players need to figure it out. I tell them things and they just need to figure it out. And like not even demonstrating a leading example on that front. To me, that obviously does not help. Like and I'm not saying like Struber can go and give these guys the hairdryer treatment and training if he thinks that's what's going to work. Like that's fine. That a lot of guys do that and it works. But I think the aspect of him not demonstrating any sort of accountability or recognition that his leadership is that they're failing under his leadership seems to set a very bad tone that seems to be multiplying every week. Is my impression.
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, I've given him the benefit of the doubt for a lot of his tenure on that. Even like earlier in this season, I think I said on the show a bit that in a lot of cases that can be evidence of just, having high standards, which, great. I want a manager to, have a system and, have kind of rigid standards for what he expects from his players and what he expects from performances. But especially as it's become a consistent run from the entire team, not, when you give up 13 goals in the last 2 weeks and in 3 games, I mean those are team failures. And when you're a manager who's a year and a half, almost 2 years into building that team, how how little he appears, even giving lip service. I mean, a lot of managers, kind of say through gritted teeth that, oh yeah, I screwed up. I got the formation wrong in this game once in a while. Struber does that kind of never.
It doesn't seem to be embarrassed at all.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of putting it too. And just it's gotten a little bit, and maybe not even a little bit, out of balance. How much, like you're saying, Brit, he goes directly to, he's I guess good in a way about not really, outside of Morgan being the most sharp example, and then the Harper situation last year, he's good about not going out of his way to single guys out by name, but pretty consistent with just saying, the players don't want it enough, the players aren't killers, the players aren't sticking to the game plan, what have you. And like I started off this spiel with, I mean, that's fine at a certain level of balance, but with the results getting as kind of, quite frankly, shocking as they have been in the last couple of weeks, the fact that there's nothing on the other end of that where he's taking any responsibility, even rhetorically, is becoming
I think
issue.
This is something extra that's happening right now. This last 2 weeks, the amount of goals we're conceding and the way that we're totally just fading from games and sort of giving up. Because I think the contrast with last summer is actually a really good one, because I think last summer is a pretty good example of looking at the squad and saying, like, all right, Struber kind of reeled in his system. He reeled in his aspirations and plans for the diamond midfield and kind of originally what he wanted to do with his strikers, making these runs.
The March 2017 season.
Yeah, and he was like, all right, we're going to play sort of compact and conservative, and the team really kind of banded together and had really shut down defense. And then it was very frustrating for some of us, for me in the summer when we were drawing Cincinnati 0-0, and I sort of had to swallow some medicine and be like, all right, yeah, Struber doesn't really have the guys, and like we're a little undermanned right now, and this is sort of a transition season. And I think that was the read last year. And that was the kind of thing where you could see where lacking a couple players at a couple positions, it's like, yeah, this is keeping us from moving forward. But the team was not imploding. The team was holding it together pretty strong, and the mentality in the team seemed decent.
Even when the scoring was still an issue, the team was, I mean, they only, through the whole season last year, they only gave up more than 2 goals once.
Yeah.
And through that whole stretch where they ended up creeping into the playoffs, like I said, the scoring was still an issue, but the team was never giving up more than a goal a game. Even in games where they looked pretty flat, they were not falling apart, like you're saying.
Yeah. And
even in games where they were looking tired, I mean, to go to the kind of the summer heat theme, that's a little more of a long-term discussion about
right. And
the teams and its tactics.
So I think this also informs kind of like the question of like, what is the problem with the squad more systemically, or the club more systemically. To me, it's like we're not really watching like a lack of quality per se in the players. Like, I think there are definitely positions on the squad where we could have a little bit of a step up, have some more depth in particular, but this isn't really like depth. Like the difference between a really good player and a mediocre player isn't that a mediocre player sort of runs out of energy at the 60th minute mark and starts defending like a youth player, like the way that this team is like completely imploding towards the end in this Colorado game is unusual. Like, if you look at other teams that have these sort of implosions, it's when the team is losing morale, it's when it's losing organization, and everything is sort of free-falling at once. It's like an extra bit of gas that's been thrown onto this fire here.
It's a little bit of a ripple, I think.
Yeah.
And there are like different waves, I think, of what to me appears to be this kind of confusion among players on kind of A, what their role is, and B, what the system is. Like, I think first of all, like, you have a case like Dylan Nealis in this game, right? Not the best Dylan Nealis game, I would say arguably a very bad one. On surface level, you might attribute that to something like, hey, Dylan Nealis is just not cut out for that role. He doesn't have the talent for that.
And we've seen that happen at the club before, like Tommy Redding, and you're like, okay, fine.
Yeah.
We know about that.
Right, but then you like, I think if you analyze his game a little bit more directly, especially in this one, his biggest issues were kind of like hesitating a little bit in position, as well as lacking a little bit of aggression as a wingback. And, I would say he's been playing center back for 4 games straight. Starting him there might cause a little bit of confusion. But also there's a layer of confusion, like even within the course of the game, we're switching like what system we are playing. Well, like you have to be able to play A, 5 different systems in one game, and B, 2 different positions from game to game. So there's like in not only a lack of continuity from game to game, but like within that same game, you don't know what your role is, and therefore how are you like A, judge on what success for that role is, and B, like what do you even know what you're supposed to do, right?
Well, yeah, I think even that gets a little bit away from where I think Brit was going, where it's not a single player. It's not a single player with, low quality, supposedly, where this team is unraveling. I mean, these results in the last couple of weeks are, across the board. I mean, you don't give up these many goals without the entire shape falling apart. And if there's a single player who's low quality or having bad performances in that game, that player has been a part of the team all season, where they've been in, solidly near the top half of the Eastern Conference all year. This team beat City in the Cup 3-0 a month ago, and now is all of a sudden just, even after guys like Reyes have come back and Yearwood has come back into the squad and given more options, all of a sudden now the team is just poor quality. That makes zero sense.
Yeah. And we're the better side the beginning of this slide is a 1-0 loss to City at home, where we're the better side for 50, 60 minutes. Don't take it from me. Take it from Higginbotham, who's like the Philadelphia guy. He's not our buddy. He's not going to be overly generous to us. But that was a game where we were executing our plan all over them, and then just faded out of the game after making a weird change. And then that's kind of been the beginning of this slide. We also have had a really gutsy point away in Philadelphia, the first place team in the conference. We're 4th place, I think, right now, after Montreal just won. That's the frustrating thing about this, is that, like, we are, despite all of this, like, weirdly close to the top of the table. I mean, even if we had just still had those points banked from those weird dropped positions at the beginning of the season at home, like, we're talking the Montreal game, the Columbus game, the Minnesota game, like, just eliminate those mistakes, boom, we're already at the top. So to talk about this being like, oh, the side is like debilitatingly like weak is just off basis for me. Like, it's not really like getting at like what is the frustrating part about this. To me, the frustrating part is that there seems to be a real lack of substance when it comes to like the connection between the manager and the sporting department, and like instituting or executing results on the field, and like what the standards are. Like, the manager Struber right now seems to be adopting a mentality that he can just sort of kick the buck up to the sporting department and say, well, I don't have the tools that I need to get this. And the sporting department is apparently not able to address or understand his requests to some level, or is not equipped to do it, because we haven't been able to apparently get these players that Struber wants by the end of this deadline today. Maybe we'll have 1 or 2. And then it leads to this sort of situation we've been describing, where Struber then sort of throws his hands up and appeals to like a familiar refrain out there. He's like, well, what do you expect me to do at this club? Like, it's just the quality is so low, despite the fact that he's actually done a couple really impressive things with the team with the resources he has, but he's just sort of convinced himself, apparently, and trying to appeal to everyone else that he really can't do any better, and he's not really gonna try. I don't know.
Right. Also, like,
there were a couple hints of it sometimes, but even Armas never really got on that tip too much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, like, look at the teams we're playing against, man. Like,
yeah, fucking look at this Colorado squad.
Yeah, that's just unbelievable.
Give me a break.
First time they've won on the road in like over a year.
Yeah. Like, look, can you really blame Gerhard Struber, he doesn't have players like Colin Warner or,
Lalo
45-year-old Abubakar, 62-year-old Drew Moore.
Jazzy Zardes.
Yeah, right? Like, as we all know, the Red Bull faithful for years have been screaming, please, please spend money on such big vets like Jazzy Zardes. That will solve all of our problems.
I mean, we almost did get Dwyer that 1 year, right? But
is that true?
I don't know.
I kind of refuse to believe that's true.
But like you said, tools, right? And it just made me think. It's like, we have a bad carpenter. Why are we chopping down a fine tree for someone who's complaining about his tools?
Right. Yeah. Frustrating. Is there an end to the skid in sight? I don't know. It seems to, like, recently our other skids in recent memory, which is really only 2019 onwards, have had some sort of end one way or the other. I don't know if they've been this severe, though. I mean, the results in this one are, it's been 3 losses and 1
I mean,
win,
there were
enough,
fire Struber chants coming from the South Ward.
That surprised me, yeah.
It's actually been 4 losses if you count Barcelona.
Oh, right, of course, yeah.
But no, yeah, you were saying Peaches.
Yeah. Well, the South Ward just started saying fire Struber. Some people might have joined in.
There's been a sort of I saw a funny thing online, just chatting after the game. There was somebody replying to some thread I got tagged in where arguing that we have, like, debilitating depth or something. And
USL level talent.
Or like one thing that they were saying was like, oh, like we don't have a backup striker, which is true. Something we've said on this show that, like, yeah, we need someone to at least replace what Fletcher was supposed to be. And then, like, the follow-up to that was like, oh, I mean, is Klimala supposed to play 90 minutes? I'm like, yeah, he is.
Your good players are supposed to stay on the field.
That's a quote from Gerhard Struber, actually, that, professional players should be able to play twice in a week.
Right.
Oh, what a novel concept.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know what, it really does seem like it's some sort of idea or dogma that he has, that he finds, like, some of the most key guys on the pitch and seems to be like, oh, I gotta save them. I gotta, like, I don't want to use their finite mana or, like, their finite energy. He's
on the Trump fucking health plan.
Yeah, he's like, oh, I don't want. They're using up too much of their good juju.
Their soccer points.
Yeah, exactly. Let's pull them in. But, like,
I was gonna use the Football Manager, like, health bar analogy, but decided to just go in on Trump.
But, like, slightly more seriously, though, I think his rationale is maybe more that, like, oh, obviously the other manager has a response to this, and I'm going to preempt that response by taking out our current system, taking out our key player, and putting on a different thing that's really going to throw him off.
That it's a chess game with Gary Smith and Robin Fraser.
Right. And then, meanwhile, all our players are like,
he's in MLS to do.
Oh, fuck, what's going on? How many different things do you have to do now? And the team has looked completely listless for the 35 to 45 minutes that after he makes these changes the last couple weeks, and just starts shipping goals all over the place and look dead inside and outside, for that matter. It's like, maybe you can just keep what's working on the field. Like, it's and maybe this goes back to, I think, some of the more early skepticism people had of Struber. And I'll admit, this is not something that I had Struber clocked for. This is other people were saying, like, if he's at Barnsley, he's been at the Austrian club, where it's kind of mid-table fighting and scrapping, where, like, maybe he's used to sort of surviving relegation battles and not really necessarily pushing over the top. And it does seem like the concept that we might just assert our system and our tone on the game for the majority of the match just does not really occur to him as, like, a natural thing we might do. It seems to be a built-in assumption that obviously the game state's going to flip, obviously we're going to fade, and I need to take some sort of preemptive measure to preserve that.
And how we've speculated that a lot of this could just be self-serving, excuses basically for some of the results, but how much of his complaining or thinking that he doesn't have the tools is just muscle memory from coaching clubs like Barnsley and Wolfsberger and Liefering. Like,
that's true.
How much, giving him the benefit of the doubt, Struber's advocate, how much of that is just him kind of doing what he knows, what's worked in the past. Even in the past, I'm sure some of his complaints about not getting the transfers he wants were obviously kind of craven in nature, but could also just be his security blanket, so to speak, for how he sets the team up, even on game days.
I guess I'm also thinking from his perspective, maybe if he's in an next interview, and they're saying, so Gerhard, we've looked at the game tape, we looked at your record at your most recent job, and there's a lot of these games where it seems like you struggle to like close out games, and there's sort of mixed results, especially after you make these rafts of subs that are like, what do you want to talk about? What do you say about that? And he could say, well, I had a very rational, reasoned and thought out take and what I wanted to do, but unfortunately my resources and yada yada weren't able to execute it, and that's why, and show on paper what he wanted to do, which probably would have some sort of rationale to it. Or if he just kept to his initial plan and kept his guys and trusted them to cook on the field, he wouldn't be able to say that. It'd be like, yeah, I don't know, like I trusted my guys to go out and do the job and they couldn't do it, and if he coughed up a lead, by just keeping his guys out there. So I guess like maybe like doing these masterstroke big plans in the second half at least gives him like a backup plan to say in the next interview if someone gets on his case, because he can at least show his work. Whereas if he didn't do it, it would make him look more foolish for just trusting his initial setup.
He's so middle management. It's insane.
Yeah.
It's funny because it's like he's very proactive in the things he's doing about being reactive to things that don't exist yet.
Right. It's like
I actually, that was my question to him actually after the match, was not necessarily exactly the same as what Peaches said, but semantically it was just that is there a difference between when this team has to play proactive versus reactive? Does this team struggle once they've asserted themselves on a game and don't feel, the need to have to kind of chase everything down and kill games? I don't even really think if it's a thing of like, to use the word complacency coming to mind. I don't even really think it's that as much as just, does a game state like going up 2-0, 3-0, and 3-1 in a first half just not lend itself to a front foot pressing game for the next 50, 60 minutes? And Struber's response was just kind of, in character, just kind of, we play proactive. That's how we want to play. I expect, the players to keep the energy up through the whole game. And, fair enough. But, and this became a little bit, to get off Struber's back a little bit, this became a little bit of the more big picture conversation online in the last couple days after the game, that maybe, and maybe this speaks to some of the transfer and planning issues recently, but maybe there's just a situation where Red Bull in general, the ownership group, the administration, what have you, is starting to get a little disillusioned with the idea of having a ideological pressing setup at all of their clubs, because of the fact that both, and I talked about this myself a little bit online, both that there have been general, the dialectic of tactics within the game as a whole, both here and worldwide, is that a lot of teams press now. It's not a novelty anymore. So teams have developed tonics for it when they're facing it, so there's that element of it. And then there's also that it's starting to seem like there is a bit of a ceiling, even in a vacuum, for a pressing system, if we're going to take Struber at his word that, good, solid players can't go 60, 70 minutes in it and, live up to the standards it requires. If your tactics require players to, run themselves dead, or to avoid running themselves dead, you have to switch them around constantly. And you can't have your best players on for most of the game every week, then it's kind of a faulty system.
Yeah.
So.
And I would mind it a little bit less if he could at least just do some more like for likes, and maybe he doesn't think he has the personnel for that, maybe, but
another strange thing that happened, or that happened in this game and sort of raised this issue more than it ever has, is that Struber subs not just defenders but center backs more than any manager I think I've ever seen.
Right. And the center backs,
some of it can be rationalized by Reyes coming back from injury, but he still uses that as a rationale for taking Long off all the time, that he's still resting him, that he's coming back from an Achilles injury, almost 18 months ago.
I was gonna say he doesn't really take them off because he's changing shape though.
No,
yeah,
he's the more than any man. I don't know that I've seen any manager in my years watching the game that systematically for resting purposes take center backs off. I mean, mind you, we are in the era of 5 subs, overlapping with the entire time Struber has been here, but very, very strange, because it's not just that it's a statistical anomaly. It's just weird. That's more center back subs than is numerically typical, but it's also just a bit of conventional wisdom about the game that I don't think has been debunked really.
There's a reason center backs
in the analytic it hasn't been debunked by analytics or anything, that center backs, both like you're saying, Peaches, are able to play 90 minutes more easily than other positions, and changing out center backs, both subbing both week to week and especially subbing them, puts your team at risk for losing structure more than any other position.
Yeah, and it's center back is not, it's a very physical and physically demanding position, obviously, but it's not the same type of physical demand of sprinting, right? Yeah, it's not as I'm saying, the runs of a forward are obviously, in its own philosophical way, selfless, but but the center back positioning and it's about being smart too. In good center backs use less energy,
and center backs need to be in the rhythm of a game.
That's true. Yeah.
Center backs need to have continuity and understanding with the shape of the rest of the team. I mean, it's
not just that too, but it's also kind of I said this during the game, because I noticed that during our build-up, none of our players could play a fucking through ball to any of the runners who were actually making a diagonal run inside, and a lot of that has to do with trust in your technique, that you'll be able to weight that ball well, but also B, that you'll have trust in your runners on making that run. If you don't have that kind of continuity or fluidity, you'll never get an attack that's really jiving together, right?
So I am going to take a little bit of a detour and make some excuses for Struber, I guess, here, but yeah, there were some moments in this Colorado game, I can't quite remember if they were before or after the collapse. I know definitely a little bit before the first goal that was given up off that Coronel ball, that Struber had been yelling at his defenders to hit it long more and not try and play short passes, not try and play with Coronel, to just hit it deep. Right before that play where Coronel gave it to Caceres, who got turned. So Struber was kind of cognizant of that and wanting his team to play it long, but then also, and again, to give him a little bit of credit for pointing out what I think is a concrete viable issue, was that Tom Edwards not being a part of the team for still unclear reasons over the last week does remove his best long ball player. So, we've talked about how Tolkien can be a little hesitant on the ball, even though he does play a decent long ball from time to time. But yeah, without Edwards in the team, there might be a little more of a tendency in the back line to play a little bit short and get themselves into some of these dangerous situations. But all that being said, that's on the manager to get figured out 1.5 to 2 years into his tenure.
Yeah, I don't think it's any player's natural inclination or just a lack of quality that would get you to play short in your own third when clearing. I feel like that must be some sort of intentional thing we've been working on. I mean, it does seem to be sort of a signature of the Struber era so far that we do like knocking around once or twice to draw in the other team before then trying to clear. But I did notice, even when we were playing well in this game, that we've been repeating a thing throughout this year, which is our clearances oftentimes get cut off right by like the opponent's midfield when we're trying to clear it out of our own third. Most of the time it actually doesn't hurt us too much because we're able to reapply pressure, but it doesn't look like it's an intentional feature that we've been trying to do. And it's been really strange because, I mean, obviously they're pro players. They know how to clear a ball fully if they really want to. But there's just been a lot of times where we've struggled to get the ball out of pressure. So it's interesting that Struber was yelling and giving direction along those lines, and I think especially interesting that they weren't able to actually execute it, right? Like, I don't know.
I think to speak to what you were just saying about how we've had a lot of those goals both on the set pieces and in like the goals from the run of play, like the one that Rosenberry scored in this game, where the ball bounces out to that shallow midfield area and other teams are able to pounce on it. I called it a Luquinhas goal, like those screamers that he and Morgan were having a couple months ago. Boy, salad days those were. But that I think that is a symptom of Struber's structure in a different way, where obviously he's pretty much stuck with this 5 in the back and then 2 6s kind of base in the team, with most of the summer it being Amaya and Caceres who are the those dual 6s, but they obviously neither of them are really I mean, Caceres maybe when he was a teenager, but neither of them as pros have really been natural, deep, anchor, number 6 defensive midfielders. They're both kind of shuttlers, 8s, whatever you want to call them, and they basically are, based on what we've heard from Struber on how the attack is supposed to play out, supposed to get a little bit forward and supposed to be kind of covering all that space in the middle. There isn't really a dedicated 6 in the team, and I think that player who is dedicated to sort of sitting behind the play and behind the action is the guy who you would normally depend on to cut out those situations, and we don't have that the way Struber is setting up the team this year. I don't think that's a risk you take when you play that formation. It's not like you have to have that sort of dedicated shield midfielder, but you do sacrifice goals like that more often when you don't have a system with that player.
Yeah.
Whether that's one of the transfers Struber wants, it sounds like maybe contextually that might be the case. I mean, we had Yuba Diarra last year, who was sort of a prime fit for that sort of position, but like I'm saying, I mean, it's a trade-off that appears to be going against us recently, that you give up goals like that when you set up a team or a midfield like that.
Yeah, and it's also funny thinking back to when we were still trying to play that diamond, We just haven't tried to do it at all since then. Yeah,
that was another interesting little convo that was happening that... and again, to give Struber credit, which the diamond that we were using in the early part of 2021 was sort of the expected formation. It had become Struber's somewhat signature in his short managerial career before coming here. And even with still kind of feeling out the personnel and maybe not having some good fits in different places, you could see the ideas there. Just struggling a little bit with the execution, but and the retort to that, or the latter end of that conversation, ended up being that you were kind of talking about this earlier in the episode now, Brit, how last year Struber sort of buckled the team down and decided to get a little more pragmatic and just decide to kind of flood numbers back and keep the team shape above all else, and it blunted the attack a little bit, but it got the job done while the team was still in this kind of transition state. it seems like Struber thinks the team never came out of that transition state, even though we now have, I think it's fairly objective, even from the start of this year, that he has better tools with players like Morgan and Luquinhas and some of the younger guys who have taken steps. I mean,
we're not starting Wiki Carmona every week.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, and, I just think it's strange that, especially now that, Shield is gone, to borrow a phrase, especially now that the rest of the it would take a lot for the team to fall out of the playoff picture at this point. I don't think that's really at risk, but for the rest of the regular season now, there isn't really. Struber's mentioned wanting a home playoff game as a big goal, which fine, but he's also been shading recently about how the team doesn't have good enough attendance, so there's that. But anyway, unless you see that as a goal, there's not a ton of pressure to get results week to week, especially with Shield and seems like even conference maybe out of the question at this point. So why not try and build a little bit? Why not take some chances with trying to set up that diamond again, trying to set up something that isn't this premise he seems to have worked on or worked with since the doldrums of last summer, that he just has to run this kind of rigid, flat system and hope for the best, as opposed to imposing a more, not to use the buzzword again, but more proactive, more kind of constructive system. Yeah.
I wonder if he's tried it at all in training this year.
The diamond?
Yeah. Or if he's taken any sort of steps about that. If you bust out the diamond this weekend in DC, I'm gonna be mildly amused. But so do we have anything, can we say anything about transfers at this point at 8 p.m. on Thursday afternoon? Do we know what's going on? Was there a Cork pop on the timeline already?
There was a little Cork pop.
It's more of a Cork fizz, I think.
It popped.
It popped. Yeah.
Well,
Please.
Yeah.
Don't dismiss the pop.
Yeah. I think surely by the time this episode is out, it'll be clear that Kyle Duncan has been brought back to the club.
On loan?
On loan, it appears, from some of the further reporting that's come out.
Any options?
Friend of the show, Kyle Duncan.
Yeah, that's a real weird. I feel like it was only a couple weeks ago where we were like, oh, remember that?
Yeah. So,
oh man, that's gonna be strange.
It's the first. When we were talking about earlier, it's the first player who has returned to the club, unless you count Ryan Mira's fucking thing, which no.
That was a long time ago by now too.
But I think actually it was the same year that Dane Richards was briefly re-signed.
Oh yeah.
But beyond that, it's just, and then this speaks to the thing that I touched on earlier, that maybe either on macro or micro level, Red Bull or Red Bull New York are shifting away maybe from the Ralph Ball ideology of what kind of signings you make, because doing a retread signing, bringing back a guy who you've already moved on from, is not in that playbook at all. So will be interesting to see. He hasn't set the world on fire since he went to Belgium at all. I think it seems now the main motivation for that might have been to make a last minute, kind of grasp at getting into the national team before the World Cup. And now that has not really popped off, probably a little more willing to come back into the team after he walked at the end of last year, but still going to be alone. So we'll see what it ends up being in the long term. Like I said, like I hinted at, we've had our sort of issues with Duncan over the years, but I think this is
and also
the
way he was used too.
Right. But I think in this quite strange context that this season has become or this season is built. I think it's a move that makes sense to shore up some of the more immediate issues in the squad. So.
It is. I mean, do we have any information or any better sense of what actually sort of happened with him at the end of last year? Because it is funny looking back. Just last year, I was saying, why are we playing Kyle Duncan every single minute we can when it looks like he's going to leave on a free?
Right.
It looks like everyone knows this, and then he did do it. And then also, to a little bit lesser extent, you could kind of. You didn't have a super confident sense that he was going to go light the world on fire in Europe. He kind of struggled being in Europe before, just sort of fitting in and socially and just getting his feet down there again. It didn't really seem like it didn't really seem like he was in a great position to try that again. Lo and behold, that hasn't happened again. Now he's back. It's like, part of me just wonders, like, why, like, did we offer him a contract? Why didn't he just sign it? Like how much was this even thought out? It just seems like everyone on each side could have realized that this would have been a more prudent decision. But there's so many different ways that it could have come out this way. But I mean, it's not the end. It's not. Yeah, why not? Why not have him back? We'll see. Let's have another option. But it is gonna be.
It's disappointing for Kyle Duncan in a way that he's only been gone for that long. I feel like, doesn't really scream like irritation.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any insider dirt that far as his personal motivations and stuff like that. Just again, contextually, all I can really speculate is that he wanted to get back into the national team picture, which seemed like a possibility a year ago, but has obviously not been brought in by Berhalter for any of the camps this year, and it has a minuscule chance of making it into the World Cup team. So that might have been what the European move was motivated by, to sort of make himself stand out a little bit in that respect, and it hasn't happened. So why not come back home? Obviously, he is a hometown guy, part of the scene here, and has some good days on the pitch. We'll see how it goes.
Maybe we'll finally get him to play, like do the Gareth Bale on him.
Move him up.
Yeah,
they're just doing that with Harper. Yeah. Harper's lately. I mean, Harper's going the full Mobius strip now of be playing as a straight up winger again. It's not going as well as him at wing back, but who knows where he'll be a couple months from now.
Yeah,
he'll be a center back.
And is there anything about the Brazilian striker Elias
Regbull? That one looks like it's been pretty cut and dry since it first came out Wednesday, by Gustavo Guimarães. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. I apologize, Gustavo, if it's not. But another signing, a little bit like Fabio Gomez last year, Brazilian second division guy who maybe has a little bit less of a profile than Fabio did, hasn't played overseas yet. He's just been a little bit of a kind of squad reserve guy for Grêmio, one of the classic Brazilian clubs, but only really has had experience at second division level in Brazil. 20 years old. Juan Mesa, Profe, was kind of commented online that it's in line with signings that they've spilled over into New York with this and Fabio last year, but have been kind of a systematic move that Red Bull Bragantino has made in the Brazilian league the last few years, where they sign a lot of guys who kind of stall out at academy reserve level at some of the bigger Brazilian clubs, and hope that they can kind of hit jackpots on some of those guys. And very, very, very little out there about him, but we'll see how it goes. It's going to be a loan with an option to buy, so apparently that strategy has not left with Kevin Thelwell. Both him and Duncan are going to be loans with options, so we will see how those work out. It's looking like those might be the only 2 deals that get done in this last few hours, but a little bit kind of shaking around out there. It's one of the more active deadline days that there's been in Red Bull's history after what was a conspicuously quiet window as a whole.
I mean, I feel like it doesn't really. Maybe not. Maybe I'm reading a little too far into it. But getting a lot of business done on deadline day, I feel like usually doesn't bode well in terms of like long-term strategy.
It's not the Red Bull way, so to speak, and it's just not. Especially not always a sign of just general
loans with options
planning.
To buy usually suggest to me like, oh, they gotta shop these guys out and they landed on us.
Can I get a Per Mertesacker in here and a Yossi Benayoun,
Kim Kallstrom,
and ooh, that's good. But I think the one transfer window I'm thinking of it for Arsenal is like Arteta, Mertesacker, Benayoun, and
the one after the 8-2 United game.
Yeah, Park Chu-young. It was, I can't remember. He only played one cup game for Arsenal, so I barely remember his name. But it was either Park Chu-young or Park Ji-young, who only played once. All 4 of them were on the last final day. The thing about older players is interesting, though, because I wonder, or like guys who kind of stalled out at academies, because I know that's been a thing in baseball analytics and scouting recently, and that. So I wonder if this is a wider sports analytics thing that's catching on. Like the Astros in particular apparently have done really well at getting older international guys for like dollars on the penny, because usually baseball teams sign like 12 and 13-year-olds like under the table for a ton of money, and they just picked up a lot of really good pitchers for really cheap. So I wonder if Red Bull's picking
like
up on
baseball
that.
Players are going after some of like maybe the more like college age like Caribbean players who fall through the cracks.
Although it's more like 13, 14 is like where everyone pays a lot of money to try to get these guys, and this latest wave has been doing like more 18 to 22. Yeah. So, because I guess a lot of people just assume those guys are washed by that point, but then turns out they aren't.
Right.
So that'll be interesting to see if that catches on as a larger trend in soccer scouting.
I'm doing a real deep cut here. We're turning Red Bull into the Glenn Hoddle Academy in Jerez.
Oh, that's too deep for me.
Is that too deep for the show? Well, maybe somebody out there, maybe one of you listeners,
I'm ashamed.
will appreciate the reference. Sass probably will.
Yeah. Well, to wrap up, so you guys, we've got DC on the weekend. Wayne Rooney's assembling the crew down there. You guys are heading down there. Looking forward to anything in particular, Red Bulls wise or otherwise?
I'm gonna buy like a stuffed aircraft carrier at the Smithsonian or something.
Yeah, I was gonna get that, but like
a plastic space shuttle,
the form of a jumbo slice submarine, nuclear submarine, I guess.
Nice, yeah.
And then that's mostly it. I forgot that we're going for soccer, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean that'll just be a couple hours, but
thankfully.
So.
We'll be able to take another metro line. It's always nice.
Is that a new metro line that goes over there?
No, just like not a New York based one, I guess. Local transit.
Oh, okay. Sure, yeah.
It's always a novelty to take the local public transit.
The brutalist moon station subway.
Maybe
as
we'll
opposed to
check out the bike infrastructure in DC.
gritty
see
pizza
how much
rat
it's
subway.
changed.
I still have not been to that new stadium.
This is my first time too. To be.
Oh, you haven't been to Audi?
Yeah, last game in DC I've been to was at RFK.
Yeah, same. We were, before we hit record, we were trying to remember when actually that was. But yeah, Red Bulls wise, my expectations are completely shot. Not to say that they're low, but just I don't know what to expect.
It's completely disorienting.
It could either be like a mild bounce back or just total collapse from this point forward.
Right.
And I'm not, really sure.
It's a little not really looking forward, honestly, to piggyback on the Buck Showalter quote we've gone back to a lot this season. I'm not really interested in the game's answers for my questions right now. It's a little foreboding at the moment. It'll definitely be an interesting one. It'll be a real pulse check, going up against a team that seems to be getting a Hollywood version of the new manager bounce with Waz Rooney, with Wasford Rooney, with his fucking Fanatics baseball hat on the touchline,
Nice.
Whipping the team into shape. I'm gonna be pinching myself getting to see Ravel Morrison.
Oh,
that's gonna be.
Is he already there?
I think so. I'm not sure. I'm gonna get to say hi to Victor Paulson for the first time in 10 years. But more importantly, I get to see Ravel, which means more to me than the entire Barca, side combined. I'm gonna get kicked out of the press area if they have Ravel as one of the press conference.
If you get to ask Waz a question, I think you should just ask him entirely about his tweets to Philip.
I will. That's exactly what I will do.
Are you looking forward to playing against Philip? Just kidding. He's gonna bore the tits out of you. Or was it boring him to death? I don't know. Just classics. Cool. Anything else for this week?
Do we? I think I should know, but do we have a midweek game right after? It's fucking felt like it the last few weeks.
I really hate this Tuesday. This is twice in a row we're recording on a Thursday, and I don't care for it.
Right.
I don't like seeing you guys this close to the weekend.
Okay, yeah, we'll have a break before having Orlando at home.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. So
well, that's my player Q&A game, guys. If you have a question for a player you want me to ask, send it in.
Wander it through.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe we can actually make some lemonade out of this. I don't know. Let's think long and hard. All right. Well, till then.
It's Alex.